Good evening and welcome. You're watching Street Talk. Father Russ is home recuperating from his surgery. He had hip surgery and he will be limping in here next week, I'm sure. I want to thank Kathleen Mitchell for stepping in for us 2 weeks ago. Last week she was flooded out and I hope there wasn't any property damage, but her and Cousin Frankie are doing well otherwise. But thank you, Kathleen, for stepping in. My guest tonight is Robert Davidson. He is the Executive Director of Eastern Regional Mental Health Board. I met Bob, as we call him, 20 years ago? Going on 20 years. When I stepped into Reliance House as a volunteer, and I count him as a friend, though we don't spend near as enough time together, but still I count him as a dear friend of mine. Our subject tonight is the Senate bill that is before Connecticut legislature, and I'm spacing on what step it is in the process. It's been passed on to...
It's been passed by committee. It's on the floor of the Senate.
Yeah. And what it is it's Senate Bill 424, and it is about combining different departments into one large department in order to streamline processes and save the state on their budget. I'm going to read to you just the list of departments that it is proposing to combine. It's the Commissioners of Public Health, Developmental Services, Children and Families, Mental Health and Addiction Services, Social Services, and Human Services, or their designees, and the Chief Child Protection Attorney or a designee. And the concern that we're discussing tonight is what will the effect be of that move? Bob and I were discussing earlier, it could mean nothing. It could be a neutral act where everybody just becomes one big happy family, or there could be repercussions in the provision of services to all the people of the state of Connecticut and families and children. And just like to say welcome, Bob, and thank you for joining me in the show.
Thank you, Tambria. It's fun to be here. The people you mentioned are the heads of those 5 departments. They're the only people on the bill calls for a committee of those department commissioners to come together to plan the merger of their 5 state agencies. It's not a committee to decide whether, it's a committee to decide how. They've already decided that it's going to happen.
Which may then be the first flaw in this bill itself, is rather than deciding if this is a good idea, we're determined that it's already a good idea and go forth.
Right. And it's only those commissioners. I presume they can consult whoever they want. But in some departments, there's now a well-established practice of consulting with providers, nonprofit community providers, with family members, with clients of the various departments, to make sure that the services, the programs designed meet their needs. That's not part of this plan.
Right.
And these are 5 very different agencies.
They are.
Some of them work directly with clients. Some of them organize services that others deliver. Public health works mostly through regulations, through restaurant codes and sanitation codes and so forth, which is important work, but it's very different than what the Department of Children and Families does, or the Department of Developmental Services does. So it's hard to see how all of these things are going to fit together. One of the original idea was to merge so-called back office functions, the purchasing and payroll departments and so forth, and most people are okay with that.
Yeah.
You assume that if a payroll person is busy 80% of the time, and you put them into a larger pool, they'll be busy 100% of the time. I suppose there's some logic in that. I think if you ask the payroll people, they say they're busy 100% of the time now, and certainly the program people are. But there's a logic to merging the administrative functions. Somehow they got beyond that to merging the departments themselves. And that raises a whole host of issues. It assumes that they all do the same thing, when in fact their different client populations have different needs, different kinds of needs, different parts of their lives are in turmoil, and so they need services directed at specific problems. They're complex problems, so you need some training to be able to deal with them. And that training is not easily transferable. If you've spent your career working with people with mental illness, you can't all of a sudden pick up and start working with people who have retardation or other developmental disabilities, or who are going through some family dislocation. I suppose you could learn, but you can't assume that just because someone has a college degree with a major in psychology or even a master's in social work, that they're all prepared to do whatever they're asked.
Right. I know when I came to Reliance House, I was starting a degree in human services. And human services at that time was a relatively new concept. And I'm surprised that we suddenly, in our 20-year friendship, have arrived at a point where the state is going to discuss having a Department of Human Services, when I'm not sure we've still identified what those are. I like the idea that, yes, we're all humans, and we all, in that aspect fall under the same umbrella, but as you said, when I worked at Reliance House, I was learning the language of mental health and the language of addiction, and I was learning the language of homelessness and social services. And then I've jumped into other careers, and I can say that my skills working with people, some of them just that I have innately, but my knowledge and my skills have translated into other jobs. I now work in a law firm. People come in every day, and some of them have issues with their mental health, or they have issues with their living situation. I can translate it, but I can't translate that culture or the languages and the procedures that I used.
That's right. Certainly there's some common skills for all of us, and and there are things we could all learn from each other. No question about that. But there's a whole intellectual tradition and a whole series of a whole way of organizing programs that have become different species, really. And again, it's not brain surgery. You can learn it, but you can't assume that a case manager in X department could all of a sudden be a case manager in Y department tomorrow. And I think it's tremendously insulting to clients to think that they are.
Right.
It's stigmatizing to them. These are, all you people there. You must have you unfortunate people. You all have the same needs here. We'll give you some
It's kind of like the big box
plan.
store thinking, where you can just go in with your shopping cart and take care of all your needs in one place. And boy, that sounds great, doesn't it? But the big box store kills all the little nonprofits, and that's a concern that I have. Is here you have the big box government getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the nonprofits who've had great success, at least in the mental health field that I'm personally aware of,